I appreciate you guys coming out to hear what we have to say. When I was getting ready for this talk, I asked Jason, I called him, and I was kind of getting some ideas, and we talked about this concept of being on a herbicide treadmill. I kind of had a merry-go-round in my mind of how we developed all this multiple resistance, but after talking to Jason, I decided to go with the treadmill idea. So I dug up this old picture of myself, jogging. I was in college back then. I saw that flash for us. So here I am running along on the treadmill back in college. Obviously, it was in better shape, 90s, late 80s, 90s, into the 2000s. And every time a new problem came out, what did we get? We got a new herbicide, right? Just take care of it. Just take care of it. I worked for a company called American Cyanamid up until about the year 2000, and then something happened to the herbicide treadmill. We fell off. We kind of stopped developing new herbicides because glyphosate came along, and it was the best thing any of us had ever seen, by far. And there were a lot of scientists, respected scientists, who believed that the mechanism for resistance to glyphosate was so complex that we might not ever have resistance to it. But I don't think anyone envisioned, even Monsanto at the time, I recall, never envisioned a 99% market share on corn, cotton, soybeans, and 2 and 3 applications a year. So now here we are on the resistance treadmill, and I fear we're like this guy now. We're just standing there waiting. We're waiting on the next thing to come along because we've kind of had a lull in new herbicides. So we've had to go to herbicide traits. And I want to talk to y'all a little bit today about protecting those herbicide traits the same way we would protect a new herbicide as it came out. I know we're here to talk about pigweed, but it's a really good example of the herbicide treadmill that we've been on in Arkansas is herbicide resistance in rice. Now, when propanil came out in 1959, it was the glyphosate for rice. It was the best thing anybody had ever seen. So we had the old stam every Monday till it's clean, right, Ford? That was the program, and it worked, and it was good. Multiple applications on almost all of the rice acreage all the way through the early 90s until we first had resistance confirmed around 1990, and there's an actual picture of one of the first populations of resistant barnyardgrass, or at least that's what I'm telling y'all because that's what I know. So we needed a new herbicide, so Facet came along. We put out Facet Post with or in place of propanil. Now, most Facet resistance that we find is also propanil resistant. So what do we know after just one trip down the herbicide treadmill? Once it's resistant, we probably are going to maintain that gene pool throughout the course of ever how long as that weed is a problem. We pick up multiple resistance. Command was introduced in 2000. We had resistance documented by 2007. There's a photograph of the first command-resistant barnyardgrass that Dr. Norsworthy actually confirmed. New path in 2002. We already had lots of ALS resistance by 2002, but barnyardgrass, in or at least by 2006, had been confirmed. So we've got multiple resistance now leading up to the ACCA's chemistry, which Rice Star and Clincher in 2014, we had a big increase in the number of samples that came in resistant to Rice Star and Clincher. And now we're seeing populations that started out propanil resistant, became Facet resistant, and now may also be command or new path or ACCA's or multiple resistance to several of these groups of chemistry. So this idea of a herbicide treadmill is we get on it and we just can't get off because why? If you watch what we did right here, we're just taking one herbicide and replacing another, one herbicide replacing another, one herbicide replacing another. And my goal with my talk today is to give everybody, when you leave here, to thinking about how we can get off of this treadmill and stop doing that. Here's our barnyard grass screening results up until 2011. These are percentage of the samples that are coming back resistant. And again, most of these quinclorac resistant ones are also propanil resistant. Look what happened to us as we start to deal with that resistance problem up to 2014. We see a drastic increase in clincher and ALS resistance. This is because we're putting these out to deal with the increase in resistance that we saw to our other chemistry, the herbicide treadmill in rice. This is just a summary of barnyard grass screening results, but you know, ALS increased dramatically from 2012 to 2014. After 2014, we actually had a barnyard grass resistance symposia in Stuttgart. And I really believe that a lot of people that came to that got the word, because the last couple of years we've seen a dramatic increase in this concept of overlapping residuals in rice. Okay? And at that meeting, we really promoted never letting these weeds emerge. We promoted our testing program so that if you knew you had facet and propanil resistance, don't start out with facet and propanil as your first shot, and just dig a hole from the beginning. And we had one of the cleaner rice crops this past year that we've ever had. And I think it's a result of guys taking action on herbicide resistance, and we need to do the same thing in pigweed, in soybeans and cotton. The herbicide treadmill has kind of stopped, but here's an example in rice of how it's sort of fired back up. Everything in white up here we've got resistance to, and this represents all the grass herbicides that we have currently labeled for barnyard grass control in rice. So we were down to Prowl and Bolero really as our only two that we had not confirmed resistance to. The good news is new chemistry is coming in rice, so we've been able to talk about some potential new options that are going to be there in the future. Now, unfortunately, when we talk about cotton and soybeans, we may have some new herbicide traits coming, but we don't have these truly new modes of action coming, so we're at a little bit of a bottleneck. And just as a kicker, Steckle's here today, so y'all can throw stuff at him, not me, but they were the first to, and Bond is here too, as a matter of fact. They're both guilty. Yeah, Steckle was yelling and pointing at him. He's here too. They confirmed glyphosate resistance in barnyard grass this year. So we know this weed is probably just as genetically diverse as pigweed, unfortunately. Ryegrass and wheat, we've been on a similar treadmill in Arkansas for some time. We used Holon for years. It became resistant, so we just simply replaced Holon with the Osprey and the PowerFlex products. That didn't take very long. Now we've been using Axial for quite a while. We already have confirmed resistance to Axial. Our new tool is Zidua. Zidua is a pre. And while a pre can be helpful, I don't think a pre will ever be the whole answer to fighting resistance, because ultimately you end up needing a post option for management. So we're in a little bit of a treadmill and bottleneck on wheat as well. All right, coming back around to pigweed, and I'll focus on soybeans. Prowl and Treflan in the 80s, the ALS chemistry in the 90s. That company I worked for sold a premix called Squadron. Some of y'all younger people may not even know what Scepter and Prowl really are, or Squadron, but it was used on about 90% of the acres in Arkansas for a while. Glyphosate came along in the 2000s. It cured this resistant problem. Then we had resistance, as Dr. Norsworthy said, to the glyphosate. So what did we do? We turned very heavily to our PPO chemistry. Very heavily. Very heavily. Even though we talked about not doing it, we still did. We know that inheritance, we know that resistance is inherited from one generation to the next. So the question is, what's next? Well, we've got dicamba-tolerant crops coming out, right? If you hadn't heard about this, you've been sleeping or something, okay? These are not new modes of action. We have 2,4-D in enlist crops. We have HPPD crops coming down the pipeline. Right now, the new tool coming out is dicamba for Xtend soybeans. So if we follow our resistance pattern, that we've been following, and we just come in here and we add dicamba to take care of this problem, what do you think is going to happen? We're just going to add to our list of resistant weeds. We're going to add dicamba to the growing list of resistance that we have. We proved this in a greenhouse, in a laboratory study, where this particular population of pigweed, in just 3 selections using sublethal doses in a greenhouse, was selected so that a portion of the population was not controlled by 16 ounces. So we just proved that it can happen if we don't do something to address herbicide resistance and we're not proactive in managing this from day one. The resistance treadmill, all ALS resistance perpetuated glyphosate resistance. Glyphosate resistance, we took the PPOs to cure that. What will PPO resistance perpetuate? Potentially multiple stacked resistance. And this is a game changer, as Jason has already mentioned. Right now, Palmer amaranth and tall water hemp populations exist in the world that are resistant to all these classes of chemistry throughout the Midwest and the South, depending on where you go, and many of them multiple stacked. This is very scary to me. Jason already mentioned our population in Woodruff County. We also had 2 in Crittenden County that he didn't mention that we were in the same boat on in these fields. We cannot just come into these fields and grow Liberty Link and just use Liberty to clean them up. We cannot come into these fields and just use dicamba to clean them up. We've got to incorporate residuals. We've got to do crop rotation. We've got to incorporate other modes of action and other selection pressures on this population, or we'll just be adding Liberty, dicamba, 2,4-D, et cetera, to these populations. Right now, we've been heavily relying on the Liberty Link system, and I've been showing this slide for a long time. Late applications, allowing some of these plants to regrow, some of them not. These are things that we do that select for resistance. There was no pre used in this cotton. Okay? We're just asking for trouble when we do that in our Liberty system. And once this tool is gone, will we ever get it back? No, we won't. If anything, the resistance treadmill has shown us that. When I talk about a bottleneck of new herbicides being introduced, here's a slide I got from Jason that shows the total number of new herbicides introduced over time. You look back here, we peaked between 86 and 95 at around the introduction of around 100 new herbicides. Now, that's not new modes of action. That's just the introduction of new herbicides. What happened here between 95 and 05 is we've seen a major consolidation of companies. We've seen a shift of interest go from the discovery of new herbicides to the introduction of herbicide trait technology. In other words, putting the tolerance in the seed. We've seen a shift to that side of the business. We've got to protect these seed traits just like we did or failed to protect these new herbicides as they've come out. And right now that line is trending down. And if you talk to most experts and you look at the current environment of mergers and buyouts that are going on with our major manufacturers and our basics, I don't see this increasing over time. So we're going to have to protect these traits that we're being given over the next 3 or 4 years until we can get this going back up again with new products. All right, my thoughts on how to protect our technology. Once you miss a weed, it's difficult to control. It becomes a salvage. And that's what we get into with rice a lot, and one of the reasons that we saw the development in rice. Resistance is often blamed on the last herbicide in the field, but the fact of the matter is the last herbicide you put on the field is where the selection pressure is. So I had somebody ask me the other day, well, I've been putting out Liberty Link beans, and I've been using like Prefix or Zidua or whatever down and doing Liberty, But that last application that they've been putting out has always been Liberty Post, right? So they said, is that a good enough reason to rotate to extend beans? And I said, absolutely. It's a good reason to rotate chemistry, all right? If it's been working, change it. But we got to rotate to change that last selection pressure that goes on that field. We know that once resistance has occurred, it's lost. There's no fitness penalty for most part. Some resistances have fitness penalties. But in pigweed, it just seems to make it stronger the more resistant it gets. So we know we're not going to lose it as time goes on. Folks, I'm a weed scientist. Multiple resistance scares me. I've had people calling me wanting to know where they can buy a good hoe. And that's not my idea of weed science. So it is scary to think when we get into situations where we're one herbicide away from not being able to grow a crop that we want to grow in 2017. We have to protect our new herbicides with new sites of action and modes of action when we get them. And we have to protect our new seed-traded technologies just like they were new herbicide modes of action for crops. We cannot overuse these tools the minute we get them. And I'm talking about dicamba, the 2,4-D choline and enlist, and then when we do get HPPD tolerance. You're going to see our recommendations for these products include residual herbicides. We're recommending residuals in Liberty and Link right now. One reason for that, there aren't any other ways to add other modes of action to a Liberty Link system in that example I showed you up there before. And then I'll leave this out to all the companies out there, and I'm just going to kind of throw the cat over. I've kind of been harping at the grower, the end user, the guy like me that's making the recommendation. Are the companies doing enough? Sometimes we don't have good programs. Sometimes I feel like we price these products to where they are replacement products, and there's not a lot of money left. A lot of companies have rewards programs and things like that, and I applaud the ones that do and encourage them to help us economically with the seed, the chemical, the cost, and the programs to make the right decisions as we go forward with these technologies. There's all my information. Am I early? I'm good. Is there time for questions? Questions or comments? Anybody disagree? Want to yell? Yes, sir. There's microphones at the front if you want to use them.
Hey, Bob, you talked about fitness penalty. I'm not sure everyone. Could you just touch on that for just a second?
So when we have a mutation, and I'm probably not the best guy to talk about this, but when we have a mutation that enables a plant to be resistant, that doesn't always make it weedy. Sometimes that mutation may take a lot of, production potential away from that plant. It may make it less likely to survive. So sometimes resistance comes along with a fitness penalty. In other words, it's not fit to survive. With pigweed, with barnyardgrass, we don't see that. The resistance doesn't seem to have much of a fitness penalty to it. There's a lot of weedy rices, for example, that you may have a problem with one year, but over time they don't pan out to be a weed. Atrazine resistance is another one that has a fitness penalties associated with resistance. Yes, sir.
Bob, your last bullet point there on that slide said, is industry doing enough? And are we doing enough, in production agriculture through our checkoff with, university research? Are there things that we need to be doing? As an example, doing more maybe to study the genome of the pigweed and for lack of a better term, backdoor this thing somehow to try to, make continued headway and build continued success on what you guys have been doing.
The genome of the pigweed. We're going to hear some about that today, as a matter of fact. I'm glad you mentioned the promotion boards. We do get tremendous support from the rice and soybean boards. I'm a nozzle head. I go out and spray the stuff that's there, but we have, multiple weed scientists trying to understand the genetics of these plants and looking for ways to unlock things that could potentially be in our favor. I don't know what more we could do. I mean, there's probably always more we could do, but we have folks working on that side of it at just about every university. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but yes, we do have folks working on that. Keep funding me. No, I don't know. Which board? Soybean board. I think the board funding is being used as best we know how to use it. And I'm always open to suggestions for other ideas. Short of starting to synthesize new chemistry, I don't know how much more we can really do on this subject. Chet?
Bob, you mentioned the sublethal. What was that first rate that y'all used? I understand it was 2 ounces, right?
The question was on our sublethal selection, what was the first rate, and it was 1/3 of a pound.
Okay. So that just drives the point home that you got to use the right rates, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you see
definitely? Well, I didn't mention rate that much. My goal would be to get multiple modes of action into that system, but absolutely. And I'll take it a step farther, Chet. I think a pint is barely the right rate, and I want it on really small pigweed. I think you would agree. The smaller, the better. I'd feel better if the 1X rate was a quart. But we're at a pint, and so we need to go. I think the label says a maximum of 4 inch. I would say use a residual and come back when the field turns pink or at 1 inch to maybe 2 inch.
We do too.
Good point, though. Full rates.
And you've told me before this isn't exclusive to ICAM, but that you'd expect this reduced rate to
Yeah,
cause
I
problems.
mentioned it in the slide. It's also 2,4-D choline, Liberty.
Thanks, Bob.
Good morning, Bob. I would just like to make a comment on the question of fitness that Greg mentioned earlier about the fitness penalty of resistance. So there are types of mutations that make the plants weaker. That's why we're saying fitness cost. In terms of, for example, the ALS resistance, there are mutations in the ALS gene that can make the plant stronger. And so not all the mutations are the same. And so it depends on what we get. That's why in weed science we study what's going on, because it helps us understand how the plant is expected to behave. And so that's why we study some of those things. In the pigweed scenario, it is possible that some mutations make them stronger, but then there are also mutations that would be costly to them. But this cost will not be seen unless they get exposed to some stressful conditions. For example, if they're exposed to a lot of competition with a good type of crop that could compete with them. And so sometimes their fitness penalty is not displayed until they are stressed out. And so that's why the weed science group is studying interaction between these resistant weeds and different kinds of crops and different kinds of systems. And then on the comment about what the weed science group is doing on the genome studies, there's actually now a more general movement, more globalized movement in pooling resources from different groups in order that the weed science community can study the genomes of weeds a little better and understand them better. So there is now a global movement to study genomes of weeds. But what we can do that I would like to actually also request for us here in the state level is also to help the group study some of the basic questions that we want to answer. And so there is a need to, for example, understand traits of weeds that would be, would be helpful even in improving the crop. And so there's this output from resistance studies that would allow us to understand how the weeds are changing their genetic makeup so that they can survive whatever we do to them. And so sometimes understanding that particular trait is helpful even in producing a crop that could help interact with them and compete with them better. And so that's just what the group is doing in weed science.
Thanks, Nelda. I told you I wasn't the one to answer that. Jason said I had a couple of minutes left. I guess I did better than I usually do too. So proactively protecting these technologies, let's talk about them for a second. Liberty Link. Post, your only option is Liberty, right? Won't tolerate anything else. In soybeans and cotton, we can do Roundup, Liberty, dicamba. So in a Liberty Link bean, you're going to hear us really pound home recommending a residual with 2 effective modes of action. You're probably going to hear that regardless of crop. But when you get into cotton, and Tom can talk about this, you do have multiple post options. You get into extend soybeans, the new dicamba tolerant bean, 1 option post. I mean, it's already resistant to glyphosate, so we can't really count that. So we got dicamba post. So just like Liberty Link, you're going to hear us really recommending multiple modes of action pre to add some other selection pressure to that system. When you get into, I forgot where I was going next. What's the next one? Enlist. Thank you. Enlist crops, which are, labeled and they're out there. Cotton's available. Beans, as soon as they get global market acceptance, will be available. You will have 2,4-D choline, Roundup, and Liberty as an option post. So you gain a little bit on your resistance management strategy for control there. But even there, because we've been relying so heavily on Liberty, I'm going to recommend a pre up front. We're not going to get away from these pre-emergence recommendations like we did with glyphosate if we want to continue to fight the resistance treadmill. Any other comments or questions before we move on? The question was, how has something like Prowl in rice escaped barnyard grass resistance? Well, first of all, Prowl is rarely 100 on barnyard grass anyways. Generally, it's going to be the product that you rely the most heavily on, that is the most efficacious, used on the most acres. Prowl usually gets added into a program. Not many people use Prowl by itself, unless they're going maybe after Sprangle-Top mid-season in rice. Even when it was used in beans, there's always something with it, like Scepter. So we do have resistance to Prowl in the pigweed because Treflan, first out of the gate, was used very heavily, same mode of action as Prowl. We've got resistance. There may be resistance to Prowl out there that we just haven't found, but it's not that last mode of action to go on those acres. Command, for example, the resistant populations that we found, I think at least 2 of those, Jason, came from command-only programs. So they were pretty heavily relying on a pre in that situation where we found that resistance. But that's why Prowl is still a viable tool for us.